Good afternoon. My name is Chris Fleming. I'm a 5th and 6th grade social studies teacher at Roy in Schelling Elementary. Today I've sort of designed this lesson really for 5th graders who have already seen this material, but also, just as importantly, for those people out there who are at the end of their 4th grade year and in the fall are going to begin 5th grade. These are some map reading skills, some geography skills that, well, everyone needs to know. Now, everyone's been introduced to longitude and latitude from 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th, 6th. It's used in all of those grades. Each year we add just a little bit more to it. For 5th graders, this should just be an awesome review. We'll try to make it fun. For 4th graders, though, pay us special attention. There's going to be a few things that I don't think you've probably heard. So let's go ahead and get going. Whenever you see a map, whenever you see a globe, and well, I wish I had a globe. Oh my gosh, who left this here? Whenever you see a globe, you're going to see lines going up and down, lines going sideways. By now, 4th graders and 5th graders, you understand that they're latitude and longitude lines. The first thing I need to start this is a simple definition. So here we go. The simple definition we're going to use. Latitude and longitude are imaginary lines that people use to locate a specific place on the planet. Every specific spot on this globe has its own global address, and that's determined by the latitude and longitude lines. So let's talk about the latitude ones first. A latitude line. These are the lines on a map or globe that run parallel to the equator. And what I mean by parallel is these lines, as they go around planet Earth, they never intercept, they never bump into each other. They always stay exactly the same distance apart. These are going to be used to determine north and south. And I'm going to explain how that works in just a little bit. For right now, here's what I'd like you to do. I'd like for you to go ahead and get a sheet of paper, maybe a pen or a pencil. In fact, get 2 sheets because we're going to be doing this with latitude lines to begin with, and then we'll be doing the same thing with longitude lines. Go ahead and get a paper, a pencil, and here I'll go ahead and set up mine here on the board. All right, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to draw planet Earth. Let me go ahead and do my globe up here. This is the way it works. Oh my gosh, look at that perfect circle. Have you ever seen a circle so beautiful? I should be an artist. No, okay. All right, this is my first globe. And we know that the latitude lines go across planet Earth. We learned this probably in 3rd grade to begin with. But let's talk about the most important latitude line for this lesson. The latitude line that I'm talking about, it goes right through the middle of planet Earth. Here, let me draw this now. It's not going to be perfect, but of course it doesn't have to be. There we are. I'm going to make it nice and thick. And because I know this is a latitude line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and label it. Let me I'll change colors here. I'm going to go ahead and write latitude. It doesn't matter. Anywhere. I'm going to put it right under here. Latitude. Latitude line. That's an L. Now, this particular latitude line has a very special name that no other latitude line has. Does anybody know what the line that I just drew here in the middle of the Earth, do you know what its name is? Think about it for a second. Here it is. If you said this line was in fact the equator, you were right. You got it. I'm going to go ahead and write equator right here. Kind of making it messy, but that's all right. We know what we're talking about. There we go. That's the equator. That's the most important latitude line. And this latitude line is so important. It has a very special address. No other latitude line has this particular address. Here it is. I'm going to put it, I'll put it right over here on the side of the line. The address for the equator is going to be 0 degrees latitude. Whenever I put 0 degrees, I'm very careful about this. Not only do I put the number 0, but also I have to put the symbol for degrees. Here's how it is. It's a tiny little circle to the upper right of the number. If ever you see on a test, they're asking for the latitude line number. If you just put the number, but you forget that tiny degree circle, you're going to lose those points. You don't want to do that. All right, this is my equator. It is the most important latitude line. It's at 0 degrees latitude. And I want to point this out. Latitude lines are special in that no matter where you are on planet Earth, if you are on the equator, you are still at 0 degrees. It doesn't matter if you're in Africa, here where the equator is, or if you're over here in South America. If you are on the equator, you are at 0 degrees latitude, all the way around planet Earth. Latitude lines are the only lines that do that. Longitude lines don't. All right, let's go ahead and add just a little bit more information to this before we go on. What do we use latitude lines for? Now they're going flat. Latitude, flatitude is what I always say. They're a horizontal line. That means they go across. But what do we use them for? We use them to determine how far north or how far south a place is located. Here's what I mean. As long as you know where the equator is, where 0 degrees latitude is, you can figure out how far away from that line you have gone. If you're going this way, of course, you're going south. You can also determine how far away from the equator you are going north. And put a little in here for north. That's it. Latitude lines, even though they go across, you're using to determine how far north or how far south you are going away from that latitude line. In this case, the equator, 0 degrees latitude. All right, let's go ahead. Let me erase this real fast. Now, let's go ahead and go to the next one. Next one are the longitude lines. Longitude lines are those lines on a map or a globe that run all the way from the North Pole down to the South Pole. We always say it's a long way from the North Pole to the South Pole. Longitude. These lines are used to determine how far east or west you've gone. They're different than latitude lines, and I'll explain to you that in a second. Ready? Let's go ahead and draw our second globe now. Do the same thing. Draw that perfect circle, right? Oh my gosh, that's just awesome, isn't it? It's just, have you ever seen such a beautiful circle? Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to draw the most important longitude line. And honestly, it goes from the North Pole to the South Pole. And that's really all we need to know about it. So I'm going to go ahead and just put it right in the middle because it'll be easier to see if I do that. All right, there it is. That's my most important longitude line. Because it's a longitude line, let me go ahead and label that. I would like for you to do the same. I'm going to write it down here. Longitude. If you can read my writing. All right. That's longitude. Now, this longitude line has its own special address. Just like the equator was at 0 degrees latitude. Guess what? This, the most important longitude line, it's the same thing. This is going to be at exactly 0 degrees longitude. Longitude lines, they go all the way from the North Pole to the South Pole. But there's something special about longitude lines. Latitude lines, we just mentioned. It doesn't matter where you are on the latitude line, you're still at 0 degrees latitude. Longitude lines do not work like that. Longitude lines go from the North Pole down to the South Pole. But guess what? On exactly the other side of the planet, there's a line going from the North Pole to the South Pole, but it does not have the same address. This special line is at 0 degrees longitude, but on the other side of the planet, that line over there, it's at 180 degrees longitude. So it works a little bit different than the latitude lines. This longitude line has a very special name. I'm going to go ahead and write that here. This one is called, 5th graders will know this. 4th graders may remember it. Oops, erase that. This line is called the prime meridian. Prime means first, meridian means line. This is the first line, the most important line. Where is this line? This line actually goes through a town called Greenwich in the country of England. Greenwich, England, right there outside of London. Once upon a time, there was a king of England who was tired of his ships sailing off into the ocean. And then they would get lost and they would never come back. The men would all drown or Who knows what happened to them? The king got angry about this, and every time he said, look, it cost me a lot of money to make these ships, and then I have to train all these sailors to sail the ships. That's expensive too. Can't anybody come up with a system so that my ships will know when they go out, not only how far north and south they are, because they figured that part out. They knew about latitude lines. But they didn't know how far east or west they were, and that's why they were getting lost. Isn't there some way to figure this out? The King of England offered a huge prize of money, and pretty soon the smartest men in England all went to Greenwich, England, and there they sat down and they came up with this brand new system of longitude lines. And they got the money and lived happily ever after. Greenwich, England is where we say the prime meridian starts. But in all honesty, it goes from the North Pole to the South Pole, so it also goes through other countries as well in Africa. What do we use these longitude lines for? Well, even though it goes north and south, what we're using it for is determine how far east or how far west you go away from that longitude line, the prime meridian in this case. So I'm going to go over here. I'm going to draw an arrow. I'd like for you to do the same. Remember this, when you're looking at a globe or a map, east is always to your right. I'm going to put an E over here for east. And then if I sail my ship away from Greenwich, England in this direction, well, I'm going west. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say, hey, how far west am I traveling over here? I'll put a giant W there. All right. And I think that's going to go ahead and finish our drawing of the globe with the longitude lines. We did one with the latitude line. We've done one now with the longitude lines. We know the most important latitude line was the equator. We know the most important longitude line is the prime meridian. All right, there's a few other things that we're going to talk about though before we move on from latitude and longitude. Oh, let me erase all of this. All right, here we are. There's the prime meridian. Right underneath that N would be the town of Greenwich, England. As you can see, the prime meridian starts in the North Pole. It does go through Spain, it does go through other countries in Africa, and it goes all the way down to the South Pole. There's something else you need to know here. I said that when you look at a map or a globe, east is to your right, west is to your left. If you go in this direction from the prime meridian, well, you're going east. In fact, if you go east of the prime meridian, you enter into a very specific part of the world. Let me draw this. I'm going to put a big arrow here. Make sure everybody can see this. There's my arrow. If you are on this side, the eastern side of the prime meridian, we say you are in the eastern hemisphere. H-E-M-I-S-P-H-E-R-E. Almost ran out of room. The eastern hemisphere. If you leave Greenwich, England, if you leave the prime meridian and you go to the east, you have entered into what we call the eastern hemisphere. Now, what do you think it's going to be called if we go in the other direction? Chances are you figured that out. Over on this side, if you were to sail your ship out into the Atlantic Ocean, over here, you're going towards the west. Well, in that case, you're entering the western hemisphere of planet Earth. Let me write that down over here. Western hemisphere. Now again, for those who have just finished up 5th grade, this is just a simple review. You should probably be familiar with this. But there are a lot of folks in 4th grade who don't really get into the hemispheres yet. But when you get into 5th grade, you're definitely going to need to know this. And you're going to have to be able to identify the different hemispheres. In fact, I just wrote 2 of the hemispheres. Well, there are actually 4. Let's go to the other 2. Fantastic. All right, here we go. Now we're looking at latitude lines. Of course, we know the one in the middle is the equator, the most important of the latitude lines at 0 degrees latitude. We use these to determine how far away we go either to the north or to the south. Well, there you go. Here's what we have. If you go away from 0 degrees latitude and you're going northward, we say you are now entering into the northern hemisphere. See how this works? The northern hemisphere is anything north of the equator. spot on planet Earth has its own particular address, either in the northern hemisphere or down below. Well, if it's down below the equator, let's see, north, that would be south. Well, so what do you think we're going to call it down here? All right, let me finish writing this. If that's the northern hemisphere, then by now you've already figured it out. Anything below the equator, anywhere on planet Earth, we're going to go ahead and we're going to call the southern hemisphere. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? This is the southern hemisphere. Fantastic. All right, so let me review real fast. We went over the names. We've got the prime meridian, the most important of the longitude lines at 0 degrees longitude. We have the equator at 0 degrees latitude, the most important latitude line. We've determined what we use each type of line for. The longitude lines, we can determine how far east or west we've traveled. Latitude lines, we can determine how far north or how far south. We just found out that the Earth is divided into 4 different categories, hemispheres, I should say. We have the northern hemisphere, the southern hemisphere. We also have the eastern hemisphere and the western hemisphere. Australia is way down here in the south of the equator. Well, Australia is in the southern hemisphere. And I'm not kidding. The people in Australia, when they look up at the sky at night, they don't see the Big Dipper or the Little Dipper. They see the Southern Cross, something that people up above the equator, where we live, we've never seen the Southern Cross. We look up in the sky and we see certain stars that they don't see down in the southern hemisphere. When it's winter up in the northern hemisphere, it's summer in the southern. When it's winter in the southern, it's summer in the northern. Everything's a little backwards, depending on which hemisphere you find yourself in. All right, so we've identified all of the parts. Now, what are we going to do with this? Here we go. Let's go ahead and do an example. If I wanted to find the absolute longitude, the absolute latitude of a specific place on planet Earth, how do I do it? 5th graders, you know for sure. Some 4th graders, you also may already know how to do this. But there's going to be somebody watching who's still a little bit shaky on this. Let's go ahead and do one example real fast to end this lesson. Ready? Here we go. I've got planet Earth. I can see, here's my prime meridian going down there. I know where my equator is, halfway through the planet. I, for this example, decided let's use Washington, D.C., the capital of our country. Washington, D.C. is up here. You're living probably here in North Louisiana. We're a long way away from the prime meridian. We're also a long way away from the equator. How do we determine how far away we are? Well, what you have to do is you have to go ahead and you have to start at either the prime meridian or the equator. I always tell my students, always start at the equator. It's just easier for some reason. If you start at the equator, you simply travel however many degrees up until you come to whatever city you're looking for. In this case, Washington, D.C. It happens to be 39, look at that little circle after the number 39, 39 degrees north of the equator. So we say it is 39 degrees north. We've determined how far north it is. That's the latitude reading. Well, what about the longitude? Again, longitude's used to go east or west. Well, this is the prime meridian. That's my most important longitude line. So that's the one I'm going to start with. That's 0 degrees longitude. What I'm going to do is I'm going to leave the prime meridian. And I'm going to travel west. West all the way across the ocean until I hit Washington, D.C. And you can tell that's about 77 degrees from the prime meridian. Now, in another lesson, we'll talk about exactly how we determine how far a degree is. But for right now, this is just a quick little reminder of how we use the latitude and longitude lines to find a specific place on planet Earth. Again, there are no 2 places on planet Earth that share the very same address. There are lots of places on 0 degrees latitude, but they're always at a slightly different longitude. There are lots of places that may be on the prime meridian, but they're always going to be at a slightly different latitude. So you never have 2 places that have the same longitude and latitude. All right, I hope you've enjoyed just this quick review for 5th graders and maybe a quick introduction to some ideas for those people who are at the end of 4th grade who are about to go to fifth grade in the fall. You are going to be doing lots of reading of maps. You've got to have geography skills that you can do just without even question. These things that you're going to use not only in fifth grade, but you're also going to use these in sixth grade, you're going to use them in middle school, all the way up to high school. Geography skills are an incredibly important part of social studies, and these are the type of things that you're going to have to master. And it's easy once you understand a few basic things. So, hope you enjoyed this lesson. Join us again. We're going to be taking a look at other geography map reading skills in lessons to come. Thanks very much. Y'all have a great day.